Patients who have suffered a stroke or other brain damage often need physical therapy to be able to carry out activities of daily life, such as walking or feeding themselves. Physical therapy can also be important during recovery from sports mishaps, car accidents, or any other kind of injury that has impaired normal functioning or limited mobility. The Advanced Digital Sciences Center has developed a camera-based automated assistant to help patients perform rehabilitative physical therapy at home as an application of ADSC's basic research on recognizing actions and activities in video. Professor Pierre Moulin from the University of Illinois explains the project to ADSC Director Marianne Winslet.
Having been to physical rehab myself, I know that traditionally you go to the clinic and a physical therapist watches you do the exercises. And what's wrong with that traditional approach?
So one of them is the direct expense for the patient. Instead of having to go to the hospital, they can stay home. And then maybe the biggest saving is in terms of time of the physicians and the physical therapist, because the system is now automatized, and basically you have a system at home that does this monitoring as opposed to taking time of physicians and physical therapists.
I can see that if you're old and you had a stroke and you can't afford a taxi, then getting on the bus to travel across the island would be exhausting and impractical. But then on the physical therapist side, how does it help them to have a video of the patient? Don't they still have to watch the video?
Not necessarily. In fact, they really care about the data. Okay, so all these angles and all these motions, which are extracted by the system and reported as part of summary, is what matters to the physician. So they don't need to spend, say, half an hour watching the video.
Oh. Okay, so it's more convenient for the patients, and the physical therapist can handle more patients without getting stressed, so it would be lower cost to society as well.
That's correct.
In this demonstration of the physical therapy assistant, ADSC's postdoctoral fellow Bingbing Ni and software engineer Pei Young have placed a depth camera at chest height. This is a Kinect camera from Microsoft's Xbox, which costs about $150 in the US. Pei has put the camera on a small tripod on his desk. At home, the camera could sit on any piece of furniture that gives an unobstructed view of the patient's body. Pei's camera is connected to an ordinary PC, whose monitor is next to the camera. Bingbing stands in front of the camera and watches himself on the screen as he does the exercises. The assistant has been trained in advance on a repertoire of exercises, in this case, shoulder exercises. The assistant's current interface allows the patient or a family member to select between the exercises assigned to the patient. Once a particular exercise is selected, the screen shows a reminder of how to perform that exercise. As Bingbing performs the exercises, the assistant watches him, evaluates his performance, and counts his repetitions. If Bingbing isn't doing an exercise quite right, the assistant notices this. For example, here Bingbing is swinging his arm from side to side instead of in a circle. The assistant does not count these repetitions. Or, if Bingbing's posture is wrong for a particular exercise, the assistant asks him to change his position. Traditionally, all these functions would be performed by a physical therapist in person, rather like a personal trainer. The therapist selects the exercise, counts the repetitions, and evaluates how well the patient is performing. If there are problems, the therapist helps the patient understand what he or she is doing wrong. To monitor a patient's performance and progress, the therapist may use objective measurements, such as whether the patient can raise his arms straight over his head. ADSC's automated assistant can also capture these measurements. For example, here the assistant shows how close Bingbing is to the goal of lifting his arms straight over his head, 180 degrees from where they started at his sides. Here the assistant counts repetitions of Bing Bing rotating his arm. Here the assistant shows how far Bing Bing has lifted each arm. The goal is to reach a 180-degree angle. And here the assistant shows how far Bing Bing has bent his elbow. Bing Bing could be holding hand weights while he does this exercise. The assistant will send a summary of the completed exercise session to the physical therapist so that the therapist knows how the patient is progressing. Video clips from troublesome parts of the session could also be sent to the therapist. If needed, the patient and therapist could use the Internet's free video chat facilities during a session to allow each of them to see each other without a trip to the clinic, which can be very difficult for patients with limited mobility. But sometimes there's no substitute for hands-on interaction. In that situation, family members often take time off work to help the patient travel to the clinic. ADSC's assistant can reduce the frequency of these trips. To add a new exercise to the assistant's current repertoire, ADSC films examples of people doing the exercise correctly and incorrectly, and runs machine learning algorithms that analyze the footage and determine the characteristics of a correctly or incorrectly performed exercise. ADSC is working with 4 Singapore hospitals to try out the assistant in clinical and home settings: Singapore General Hospital, Changi General Hospital, Ang Mo Kio Tai Hoa Kwan Hospital, and the National University Health System.